At the beginning of 1997, David Bowie turned 50, and at the same time he released his 21st studio album called Earthling, which he recorded here in New York City. It's direct, hard-hitting, energetic, aggressive rock and roll music mixed with the jungle rhythms of bass and drum. Now, although in the 90s he's been switching styles and moods as much as he ever was in the 70s when he made classic albums like Ziggy Stardust, Station to Station, Young Americans and Low, Bowie today is more interested in the possibilities of the newer music than any of his peers, and into the bargain he's having a better time than he's ever had. David, the album, let's talk about the album first of all. Studio album number 21, Earthling. If you take Outside, which was the last one, that was sort of complex, it was sort of multi-layered. This one, if there is a difference, it's very sort of direct, it's hard-hitting, it's well delivered, there's no frills, it's... Is that good enough? Is that a good description?
But I think you're pretty close there. Yeah, I think probably because there was no forethought. I mean, it was a product of trying to get a vehicle to show the band off more than anything else. When we got off the tour, we thought we were really good. So we thought we'd go in the studio and virtually write material specifically to showcase what the band was like at that particular moment. So it was very immediate, very spontaneous, and it virtually put itself together. We did writing and recording 2.5 weeks and then a couple of weeks of mixing. But it was really very fast.
Right, but do you think your approach to this is no real different than your approach to, say, like, if you like, your most artistically satisfying albums, let's just mention one, say from 21 years ago, Station to Station, or the commercially successful ones that followed the same path, like Let's Dance or Young Americans. Do you think there's no real difference the way you're approaching this stuff now, that's the way you're doing it?
I think I really have one main way of writing, and that's it. It's a process, and it's an eclectic gathering together of the elements that I feel are actually important at the time.
Okay, well, if you went in so quickly from being on the road to make this, to harness this thing that was there, did you write the songs on the road, or did you write them in the studio?
No, we wrote them in the studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a dodgy thing to do, though,
No, I have no problem. It's very hard to actually remember back to songs, really, that I've written pre the studio now. I mean, I've worked so much now in the studio, using the studio to help me write. Reeves and I were talking about actually writing some songs in the future before we got into the studio. Is kind of, be kind of fun to do that. Maybe for acoustic, I might do some acoustic work.
Right.
And pre-written songs, which is kind of a different discipline altogether. But I feel really comfortable just writing stuff in the studio and pulling it together incredibly quickly, and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, is a place important? I mean, this album was recorded in Manhattan, in New York. Could it have been recorded in London?
Yeah, it would have sounded different. It wouldn't have had quite the same on-the-nose aggression, I don't think. I think it would have been a little more sophisticated in a way, and it would have been a little more ironic. This one is pretty primitive in a way.
Right. What about the fact that it is the first sort of production job you've done for yourself in about 23 years or so?
Yeah.
I mean, why is that? I would have assumed. I mean, it never occurred to me that you didn't actually produce.
Well, I do. I co-produce.
Well, that's
but
the point,
it's very different.
Is it important to have somebody else in there to do what? To whip you into shape?
No, not really. It's just always the collaborations produce the nerve centre for that particular album. I mean, with Niall, it's quite evident what his influence is as a producer. I know pretty much the direction I want to go in, and often the producer works in the sonic area. He produces the soundscape that's familiar to him, and what I try and do is subvert it all the time. So the frictions between us produce whatever that album's going to be. With Eno, it's the same kind of thing. We both have quite different views about what music should be, but it's the friction between us that produces that particular sound. This one, I knew exactly what I wanted. We didn't have any time to pull in a co-producer and in that way, so I just sort of went for it,
You've always switched styles and always switched moods, but I mean, the way you're switching lately, it just seems so effortless. Now, is it just a natural thing for you, or do you have to work at it?
No. I think because my interests were always in, at any given time, were in new music. whatever
yeah.
period,
Yeah.
is that that's always been, whereas other people possibly would be more interested in what's happening in the mainstream, and that would be probably the body of their record collection. My record collection looks like some kind of bizarre relic-oriented scrapyard of everything from industrial to old Harry Parch stuff from California, legendary Stardust Cowboy, Wildman Fisher. I mean, it's got the most bizarre things in throughout the years, and those are the things that I listen to. I like that.
Wait a minute, legendary Stardust Cowboy I know well. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got this guitar he made out of a bucket and he sings on top of the bonnet of cars.
And he had a one-legged trumpet player.
That's right, he did. Yeah. Also, wait a minute, Wildman Fisher, I once heard a double album called An Evening with Wildman Fisher. Now, hold on, I actually bought a Harry Parch album once.
Really?
Which is I got
Good man.
No, I'll tell you what, I read an article
yeah.
in Rolling Stone about Harry Parch.
Yeah.
And I went to a shop in New York and I bought it in there. And he's got all these things like, he's got a song called Barstow on the world of Harry Parch.
Yeah.
And he's made all these like gourd tree instruments and like,
That's right.
things that are like chimes that you, when you walk in a door. And but I mean, the guy
There's
was...
actually a school of Harry Parch in California, and
Really?
they've resurrected all those instruments. They found them in his warehouses after he died, and they've refurbished them all. And they've got 60 or 70 of these huge instruments that he made out of glass and tin cans and stuff that he actually executed and cut.
Okay, well, I tell you, there's one side of that album that has no vocals on it.
Yeah.
And I had it on vinyl in the old days of 45 and 33.
Yeah.
And when I played it at the wrong speed, and I didn't know until I turned over the other side and the vocals were different. I didn't even know it was the wrong speed.
But those kinds of things, that I think they're glorious. I mean, I played 78s at 33 and got really good ideas from them. But it's like it's playing around with all those sonic areas.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes life interesting. I don't want to just put down information I already know, and that's not what I want to do in life. You know, I really want to just sort of keep changing the spin on what sound can do. You know, you got to be prepared to do crap, you know, to get to the good stuff. I think. I think if you're going to push all the time, you've got to really be prepared to look like a pranny and do terrible things at some point or other, and just keep assuming that if you keep going through everything, eventually you'll see light at the end of the tunnel, and it won't be an oncoming train.
Right, well then, is the pinnacle of pranny... is the pinnacle of pranny, say...
The pinnacle of pranny.
The year after Never Let Me Down, in other words, Glass Spider.
Yeah,
I'm going to be honest, I saw that gig, it didn't work for me.
No, it didn't work for me either, in anywhere larger than a 5,000-seater. I think in a 5,000-seater, because I designed it to be an all-enveloping kind of spectacular, in as much it was a bit three-ring circus. There was always three or four events happening at the same time on stage. It was multi-event, a very fast event horizon. Individually, there were some incredibly good ideas on that stage, and in a small environment, it really worked well because when your nose is pressed against it all, it's kind of wow, it's like a wonder world. But to put it when you're 1,000 rows back, it just becomes this huge mass of confusion. None of it makes any sense, and that was a really bad mistake. And I was really designing on an intimate level, and I didn't really get that. I was too thick to realize that it wouldn't translate in a big... I soon found out.
Is the point for you then constant reinvention, or is it just that the excitement of the shock of the new is just what excites you?
I'm not... It's not... Yeah, the reinvention thing, I'm not... I don't buy into that at all. I think there's a real continuity with what I do, and it's just about expressing myself in a contemporaneous fashion. I'm not... You know, it's... The reinvention thing, it's an easy description, isn't it? It's kind of...
It is, but I mean,
like,
those...
Hey, Dave, you're a real chameleon, you know.
I didn't say it.
Well, you know something, David, I'm probably the chameleon of rock, you know, because what I do is all about changes, you know, and it kind of gets all that, and then,
you know, not me.
And then the French you get with, why did you kill Ziggy? You know, and the cliches are, you know, a stack high.
I won't make you mention names, don't worry, but I'll mention names of your peers, say from Rod Stewart right around to Elton John. They surf the mainstream. They're in the middle of the road all the time doing what it is they've always done. And like, how dare anybody suggest they should take on anything that's happening around them in a younger context because it doesn't work for them or they don't want to do it. But it's a cop-out, isn't it?
We obviously just have different perspectives. I think it's my choice.
Always a diplomat, listen to
It's not that, honestly. I mean, I just don't think we do the same thing. I think we're both in the music, or all of us are in the music field. It's just my choices have always been very different to my contemporaries, and even my very close friends who are of my age and are my contemporaries. We don't actually have the same ambitions at all, not even remotely. And probably my fixation is that I could have been a painter. I could have been a painter. Or I could have been a musician. I opted for being a musician, but really I still apply, probably my mind is much more in the, in the field of a painter than it is of a musician in that way. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, stop it.
Okay, well then hold on. So, how about this? Wait a minute. Then on that point, a description that somebody gave of you lately, will you accept this? The Beckenham Arts Lab boy who was sacrificed to rock music in the late 60s has re-emerged as the gentleman artist, collector, patron of the 90s. Oh. No, just
it's
say
all
no.
a bit Dame Bowie, that.
I'm afraid Lab Bowie, all right, yeah.
Yeah. I'll go back to, I'm sorry, I won't shift from, I'm just a working artist.
Okay, well,
working probably in a modern field.
Okay, and there's no way David Bowie wants to work with a safety net, if you like, absolutely.
Not really, because when I've endeavoured to do that, I've just felt that the most dissatisfied creatively as I ever could feel, and I really felt that I was just destroying everything that I thought worthwhile in my work, and I felt really disappointed in myself. I thought that I was letting myself down and letting my work down, and I would have quit. I really would have quit. I think I really would have gone back to just sort of, you know, immersing myself in the visual arts. It was it seemed at one time a real easy decision, you know. Here I was making lots of money, performing to these huge audiences, and thoroughly uncomfortable and unhappy with life. And I was getting more enjoyment out of just being back in the studio, I mean the painting studio and all that. And I thought, well, why bother, you know, I've got nothing left that really, that's it, you know, I've come to the vacuum of my life. And I guess, you see, I was around 40. So, you know, looking back on it, one also wonders if it wasn't sort of the inevitable midlife crisis as well. Yeah. Because it all happened in my sort of 40 to 44 period. I tried, you know, so hard to feel okay with it all, but it was just obvious to me that it was all going incredibly wrong.
What about being in LA, say, in the mid-70s? Was it that bad? I mean, is the story true that you don't even remember recording station to station? Because if that's true, you should maybe forget some more. Sometimes that's one of my favourite albums of all time.
I can't think of one. I can only think of one incident on Station to Station. It's the only thing I can remember. And that was trying to get Earl Slick to I remember working with Earl on the guitar sounds out in the studio itself, and screaming the feedback sound that I wanted at him. I remember doing that. I also remember telling him, take a Chuck Berry riff, dan, 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 and just play it all the way through the solo. Don't deviate from it. Just play that one riff over and over and over again, even though the chords are changing underneath. Just keep it going. He said, what, man? And I said, it'll work, it'll work. That's about it. That's about all I remember of it. I can't even remember the studio. I know it was in LA because I've read it was in LA.
What would have made you turn away from drugs then? Is this like spirituality that you had to find, or is that the route you take? Because some people do, to get into sort of back to a normal life.
Firstly, physically, I was painfully emancipated. Emaciated, rather. Emancipated came later. Emaciated. I was just not even skin and bone. I was just bone. I was bone with these veins wrapped around them. I mean, I was the most, God knows what weight I was, but I was way below. Like, I think at some points I almost reached like 80 pounds, you know. It was just really, really painful. And also my disposition was left a lot to be desired. I was just paranoid, manic depressive. It was all this usual emotional paraphernalia that comes with abuse of amphetamines and cokes and all that.
Okay, if you go back to your 20s and you're driven, and you're now...
Who wants to go back to
no, sorry, your 20s in age, but not, and now it's the 90s, and you're 50 years of age now, and you're driven. What's the difference between the two drivens?
I think the early one was a drive. I have a drive now. I'm not sure that I'm driven. It's different. I have a motor which works at a 24-hour length. Yeah. I'm very aware of the day that I'm living through now. I'm very happy about being in the now in that way. It sounds very neo-Buddhistic, but it's true. I feel very content with what I do on each day as it happens. But I think when I was in my 20s, I was always looking to the next thing. Yeah. I wasn't enjoying recording. I'd make records, but I was thinking about what the show would look like and what we could do with that. And I was always 3 steps ahead of myself. So I never enjoyed process. Yeah. But now I really enjoy making an album and then actually doing the tour and enjoying the performances, you know. And that's a different kind of feeling entirely. And possibly it's not possible until you get older. I don't know. I think when you are young, your projected event horizon is a lot more fascinating to you. You're always thinking about what you can do next, you know, I want to do this, or just in regular life, if I get this job, maybe it will lead to this kind of promotion, and you know, that kind of just a young man's ambition overrides more or less everything, and it really does change when you get older. And I wouldn't have guessed when I was 25 that you could actually still have the same enthusiasm. It's modulated in a different way. It becomes a different kind of... It has different characteristics. It's still there, the enthusiasm, but it's not so ambition-driven.
Do you think in some ways that getting married, whatever, like about 6 or 7 years ago or whatever, do you think that's actually made you a better person towards appreciating other people, if you like? That maybe you've even got more real friends now than you did maybe 20 years ago?
I'm not sure if it's chicken or egg. I think probably I couldn't have carried out this relationship and continued it if I hadn't have been in a place where I was ready for a real long-lasting relationship with somebody. So I had changed. I mean, I've been changing over the last 10 years. Always the chameleon.
Hey.
I guess I just got more. I probably had a greater grasp on the reality of what my life had become and what I wanted my life to become. So I knew that I really was looking for some kinds of emotional stabilities, you know, things that would kind of hold me to tether me to the ground a bit more. So I was in a good place when we met for that. And I guess the reciprocal love between us has kind of just kept me extremely buoyant about life. And I'm in love still. I mean, you know, it's as simple as that. I think being in love has an awful lot to do with it.
Right. Okay, well then finally, David, one last question is this. Over the year there where you played live, you had your band pared down from the 8-piece to the 5-piece, the band you now want, with the Americans in it. You played like with 9 Inch Nails.
The Americans.
Well, the Americans.
I love that.
It's the American band, if you like. With 9 Inch Nails, you played the Kremlin, you played Euro festivals as opposed to Wembley arenas and that kind of thing. East Coast ballrooms, all within the 1 year. You get off the road, you make an album, and you have this band now. For the last few years of this millennium, how do you see it's going to happen? Do you see it continuing on with this band for a while?
I think we really have a very strong affection for each other. Probably because what's happened to me over the last few years, I find it just a real joy to have real strong social contact with the people that I'm working with, as opposed to just popping in, doing my work and leaving and kind of going back into this hermetically sealed kind of isolation. So, I mean, I know already that the rest of this year is going to be working. We start in rehearsals in April, and we're doing a real biggie from May through December. Really, you know, smashing. And I'm really looking forward to that a lot. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I think, frankly, that's quite enough for me to know that I'm going to be doing that through Christmas, and that's enough. That's fine. You know, let's see what next year, you know, how it is. I don't know.
Cool. All right, David, thanks very much for talking to us.
My pleasure.
Good man. Thank you very much indeed.
Enjoyed it a lot.
Great, good man.